The First Amendment of the Constitution reads as follows: Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. With that, here's a very simple question. If Congress cannot make a law abridging, which in law means to diminish or reduce in scope, the freedom of speech, then why will the Uhuru Three have to go on trial on September 3rd of 2024 in the federal court in Tampa, Florida? If you want to know the answer to that, let's find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they happen in a vacuum, failing to understand the much broader historical context in which most of these events take place. During each episode of this podcast, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur. This enables you to better understand and analyze the events and that impact the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, or are, the indictments of the Uhuru Three. Are the indictments of the Uhuru Three a test case for the federal government? If Chairman Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville are convicted in this political attack, will free speech as we know it in this country no longer exist for anyone? Let's talk with my guest. He's a political activist and author. He's the co-founder and current chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, which was founded in 1972. And he also leads the Uhuru movement, and he's one of the Uhuru Three. Chairman Omali Yeshitela, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so very much. It's good to be with you again. This question of free speech is something that reverberates through so many means, and you give me access to speak with your show, and that's extremely important because some people recognize that how people who want to speak affected negatively if they cannot speak, but many people do not recognize that free speech attack does not only prevent me from speaking, it prevents people from hearing what I got to say. So it's an assault on people's ability to hear something that the government might not want heard or any other source. And so it's a critical question, and it's one of the things that gives such significance to being able to be here with you, Brother Leon. Yeah.
So the three of you are being charged with a violation of Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 371, conspiring to commit an offense against the United States and acting as an agent of a foreign government and foreign officials, to wit, the Russian Federation, without prior notification to the Attorney General as required by law in violation of 18 U.S.C. 951A. With that as the technical description of what you all are charged with, what does that mean, and what is the basis of these baseless charges?
I think it's a really important question because what the government is doing is using some facts to obscure truth, to hide truth. The fact is, I did not register with the United States government as a foreign agent. That's a fact. But the truth is, I'm not a foreign agent, never have been one, and have always only worked for African people. They said that we ran candidates for office in 2017 and 2019 because the Russians wanted us to do that and paid for it. It's a fact. We ran candidates for city council and mayor in St. Petersburg, Florida in 2017 and 2019. But the truth is the Russians did not pay for this. The Russians was not the idea of Russians, and we've been involved in electoral politics and have been teaching other Africans how to be involved in electoral politics for decades. They used the fact that we participated in a tour that was actually hosted by Frantz Fanon's daughter throughout the United States, a committee of the United Nations checking on the conditions of African people. And we collected petitions on the question of genocide. And we did go on that tour. We called it a winter tour. Went to Jackson, Mississippi, Washington, D.C., I think New York, and one or two other, Chicago, Illinois. That's a fact. We did those things. But the truth is that we did not do this for Russia. We did it because we wanted the United Nations to deal with this issue of genocide and reparations for African people in this country. So what they've done is take these facts and then construct a false conclusion for people. And it's extremely dangerous. And they do this at the expense of First Amendment, because everything they've charged us with has to do with us speaking, with us utilizing the Bill of Rights, or utilizing the First Amendment that you just mentioned in the opening of this show. But they cannot say that we are attacking them because they use speech. They cannot say they're attacking us because just because we ran for office, which is something that we're supposed to have a constitutional right to do. It says not because they spoke, it's because they spoke because the Russians wanted them to speak. The Russians wanted them to sow discord. The Russians wanted them to run for office in St. Petersburg, Florida, as a stepping stone to somehow Russian interfering in the election, the national elections in this country. So that's dangerous, because that means that anybody. Oh, and it's a fact that I went to Moscow in May and September of 2015 at the invitation of a non-governmental organization, anti-global movement of Russia, to participate in discussions with other people around democratic rights and around self-determination for peoples from various places around the world. So those are facts. I did that. But it's a lie that I was a Russian agent and I did it in the service of Russia. I did it because Zuckerberg, and because the New York Times, and because the Washington Post, and because the Democratic Party and various other entities refuse to give access to Black people so that we can speak independently about what our situation is. And you got to remember what was happening in 2014, 2015 with Mike Brown uprising because of the police murder of that young man in August of 2014, I think it was, because of all kinds of police murder. Right before that one, the brother who was choked to death in New York, just all kinds of things were happening, and the story of our people from our own initiatives could not be heard. And so I wanted to be heard, and I've been struggling for our story to be heard all around the world for the longest period of time.
Well, everybody knows that if you are planning to conspire against the government, if you're planning to bring down the American empire, the city council of St. Petersburg, Florida is where you're going to start. That's the underbelly. That's the soft spot. That's the weak link in the American empire is St. Petersburg, Florida. Yeah. So I can see where the government would get the idea that, oh my gosh, the city council of Florida and then the world. You mentioned that you were, when you said you were brought to Moscow on behalf of an NGO, a non-government organization, that made me think about the Maidan coup in Ukraine and Samantha Power and the NGOs that the United States has used to overthrow the democratically elected government in Ukraine, how the United States has been trying to overthrow Venezuela through NGOs. So they've got a playbook as it relates to non-governmental organizations. They've got a playbook, and they understand very clearly how that game gets played. So that's one of the hypocrisies that immediately jumps out at me. And another one is they're claiming, or they're charging you with running people for elected office, when AIPAC, it was published in the New York Times back in April that AIPAC came out and said they are committing $100 million to the 2024 election to unseat democratically elected officials who they deem to be operating against the interests of Israel. And Jamal Bowman has been a victim of that, and Cori Bush fell victim to that I think she's in Kansas City. So
no, she's from St. Louis, Missouri.
So St. Louis. Thank you. I get my Kansas City and my St. Louis mixed up.
I got you.
Yeah, in St. Louis. So here we have AIPAC operating on or with or for the interests of the Zionist government of Israel, saying publicly, we're spending $100 million. I think they spent $7 million to unseat Bowman. So there seems to be some inconsistency, if not in the rule of law, at least in the practical applications here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, especially AIPAC is a splendid example, and it doesn't have to register as the people who accept that money as foreign agents. They don't have to register anything like that, and tremendous amounts of money, as you said, are involved in that. And there are corporations who do the same thing, who work for foreign governments, and it's well known, and they haven't had to file as foreign agents. And the thing is that they claim that our movement took, I think they said, either $6,000 over 7 years or $7,000 from the Russians over 6 years. And they have taken, you talk about how they use facts to obscure truth, because we do forums and we do events online, and people make contributions to us online. And the AGM, the Russian anti-globalization movement, may have made some contribution to us online. But you're talking about, they say that over 6 years or 7 years, we got something like $6,000 from that movement. But and even if we had, it would not have been illegal. But the point is that we raised $6,000 in a few hours. We raised $300 and some odd $1,000 just to defend ourselves in this case that we're involved in. So they would take this paltry sum of money compared to the millions and billions of dollars that come from groups like AIPAC and from other kinds of and from corporations, funnel into this country and to employ people from corporations from other places around the world. And so this is just a fabrication, and they play upon the ignorance of people. They say, for example, there's someplace in this indictment, they said that we went to Moscow in 2015 or 16, and with all, they say, all expense paid trip. This gives some impression of some great luxury that what was afforded to us. And by all expense, I mean that they paid for the air flight there. They paid for where we stayed and for food. Now, I've gone on events. I've gone to international events sponsored by NGO close to the government of Spain, and they spent a lot of money. They spent money to bring me there and two other people, one of whom was from England, into Spain. They gave they paid us for coming, paid me for coming as well. But they would take this thing with Russia because the plot there is they've done so much work demonizing Russia and saying Russia is the key. That's why Donald Trump, they say Hillary Clinton didn't lose the election. The Russians won the election. This is the kind of stuff that they're feeding the public. And so it doesn't matter. That's why it's so important for us to have this kind of discussion. because they don't want this kind of stuff to get out even in a courtroom. They will place restrictions on what we can talk about in the courtroom. And that's why it's important for us to recognize that the trial has already begun. And this is some of the testimony that we're involved in at this very moment.
From what I understand, you have gone and spoken and gone to conferences in Ireland, in France, in England, in Spain, but all of those countries are European countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so long as Europe is paying the tab, and then everything's fine. I've gone to Iran twice. Yeah. Similar types of programs been brought to peace conferences and human rights conferences in Iran.
Yes.
And they pay my airfare. They pay my hotel bill.
Yes.
They pay my meals while I'm there. Yeah. That's standard operating procedure.
But you're talking to
and they give you an honorarium.
Yes.
Many of them will give you an honorarium.
Some of them will. But we didn't even get an honorarium from Russia. But you think about this, that you're talking to a jury that many of whom never even leave the United States, don't have an understanding of how this stuff is. And so that sounds like some real esoteric or thing to, people, local people here in the Tampa Bay area or in this district where they intend to put us on trial. They intend to lynch us. Yeah.
In fact, I don't know the events that you attended, but when I went to Iran, I was there for the first trip. I was there for 10 days. And not only did I participate in this human rights conference, I lectured at like 13 universities throughout the country. I was in constant motion. It was not a vacation. In fact, I even got to spend 2 hours with former President Ahmadinejad while I was in Iran.
Yes.
But I'm saying that traveled all over the country by car, by plane. Man, it wasn't easy work. The honorarium, for as much as I appreciated receiving it, if you broke it down to an hourly rate, no. When I say it wasn't worth my time, I don't mean that it wasn't worth my time. I mean, it didn't equate to a decent hourly rate.
Yeah.
So
I just thought it was really important, and I think it is important. And every time I get an opportunity to tell the world about the conditions of African people in this country, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, even when you're involved with the United States, to other countries, because it's designated almost the entire world its enemy. And I'm saying that the United States accuses other countries of these egregious kind of things, that you have to hold the mirror up to the United States and force it to look at the treatment of African people, force it to look at the situation that they've had Mexicans in cages at the southern border, force it to look at the fact that 2024 now, you've got a situation where there are concentration camps, just like Gaza, so to speak, that they refer to as Indian reservations. This is the reality of the United States. And that's what, and I want people to be able to recognize that the conditions of African people are similar and that we want support. Like I've told them, we're not looking for pity. We're not looking for charity. We want solidarity in the struggle that we're involved in. We believe that we have the right to be a self-determining people. And we believe that there's nothing in the Constitution of the United States that should prohibit us from saying that we have that right. Even if we say it in Russia, even if we say it in places like Venezuela or in Nicaragua, where I have been, or Ireland, as you mentioned, I have been. We have the right to be able to say that by the Constitution. So you got to burn it up, tear the Constitution up, and this is the conundrum that they have. And they, as you know, that since they've attacked us, we've seen charges all across the board on so many people similarly charged, being agents for foreign government.
Scott Ritter,
etc. Yes, Scott Ritter, just the other day.
Scott Ritter is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I just had Scott Ritter on another show that I do. And the FBI just raided his house last week.
Yes.
Took his computers, and in talking to Scott, What they really seem to be after in his case, because he was a UN weapons inspector,
right.
and he had all the evidence that proved there
That's
were
right.
no weapons of mass destruction
That's
in
right.
Iran. They took that trove of evidence from him, and we'll have to wait and see. And his point was because they want to rewrite the historic record, and they want to just he didn't know. I'm not going to put words in that he didn't use. They want to rewrite the historic record, and they want to cleanse the record of the information that he possesses.
Yes. And of course we see Assange just getting out of prison right now for, I've forgotten how many years he was locked up. And the only
17.
It's speech. It's freedom of press. Some of the charges against us attack assaults on free press. They attack us because we did an interview on burningspear.org. That's our newspaper. That's the .org. We did an interview with a Russian saying that the people have a right to know the position that's coming from Russia. Zuckerberg, Facebook, everything had blocked anything that people were trying to talk about that represent the position that might be coming from Russia, just like they do now about Palestine. And so we did an interview. And so they said that was evidence of the fact that we worked for the Russians. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they've done, but it's a real treacherous situation because they're at a place where they say that if you have a position that is the same position of another government, another country, and what have you, then they can charge you with working as an accomplice of that government in some crime that they claim that government is creating. And that's a dangerous kind of thing. I mean, you talked about your trips and stuff to Iran, and that's especially true when you look at Iran, because they've identified Russia, Iran, Venezuela,
China,
Korea, as these enemies, that they're contending with, and they don't want anybody to know truth that's independent of what it is that they have to say.
And when you peel back the layers of the onions, whether you're talking about Russia, talking about China, talking about Venezuela, Iran, what we're dealing with is anti-imperialism. What we're dealing with is anti-colonialism. That's what's really at the crux of this issue. It's not communism. It's not socialism. It's not any other kind of ism. It's it's anti-fascism, colonialism, and anti-imperialism. That's what's at the crux, because that's what the empire sees as being the greatest threat.
That is the question. And, from our analysis, the whole emergence of the Soviet Union, things like that, came about as a consequence of the Communist Party, the Bolsheviks at that time, refusing to participate with the rest of the colonial powers in the world in that first imperialist world war to redivide the world. And that was a world that was extreme crisis for the whole social system. That's the time frame. You look at this 1917 being the Russian Revolution. You're looking at the time of the of World War I, as they call it, a time frame that saw a struggle even happening throughout this country, bombing of Tulsa, Oklahoma. People everywhere resisting this colonial domination. And Russia became a serious factor because, unlike the rest of the colonial powers, Russia refused to participate in that world war to redivide the world. And that turned all of them against Russia too. So the Russian Revolution happens in 1917. And by the way, much of some of the law that we are being victimized has its origin in that time frame as well. Russian Revolution in 1917, 1918, all the colonial powers, including the United States and Japan, invade Russia. They invaded Russia to crush it, and that struggle that they talk about with Ukraine and what have you. Some people are able to see a beginning, and like 2014 when the
Maidan coup.
Maidan coup. But I'm saying even
thank you, Samantha Power.
Yeah. Yeah, but even before that, they've been dealing with Russia. Going back, like I said, more than 100 years, and even the NATO that they use in Ukraine, and NATO that they use to kill Gaddafi. This NATO has its origin. It was created for the purpose of containing or crushing Russia. So this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that's been going on for a long time, because they saw at one time Russia being aligned with the colonized peoples of the world and with the working peoples of the world. And this was a system that could not tolerate that, and could not tolerate it spreading globally.
In fact, if you fast forward to the late 50s and the 60s, and you look at the anti-colonial movements in a number of African countries, such as South Africa, such as Angola, what you find is the Soviet Union was involved in providing funding, training, weapons to freedom fighters, supporting anti-imperialist, anti-colonial movements in those countries, leading to the freedom of a number of those countries, along with Cuba and some others. So people really need to understand the broader, they need to connect the dots here, and so that they can understand the broader, in fact, historic context in which these events take place. People need to ask themselves, where is Patrice Lumumba University? Folks, who was Patrice Lumumba? Where is Patrice Lumumba University? It's not in Nigeria. It's not in Swaziland. It's in Moscow.
And I spoke at Patrice Lumumba before an organization of migrants that were located in Russia. That was one of the things I spoke for. And I think it's really important to say that they intend to provide some kind of Russia expert who will testify that Russia has a history of creating foils, creating forces like our party and our movement to undermine the United States and undermine Western powers, etc. And they will use the kind of stuff that you're talking about as evidence of complicity of Russia in being in control of us, because Russia did support the struggle in Angola and various other places, and trained and funded and supported. And they go back all the way to that to show that there's this historical trend coming from Russia, even though it was the Bolsheviks that they're talking about, that was for the purpose of corrupting, undermining the United States and the Western powers, the democracies. They would show that that's the typical thing, that we are typical dupes of Russia, if not dupes, cooperatives of Russia, based on the stuff that you just mentioned, which you and I think is right on. But you and I think is glorious. I mean, that puts them in a situation of having saying Mandela, who they love. He's the Negro they love. That Mandela took support from the Soviet Union and was refused, along with other African countries, to condemn Russia around the Ukrainian question, precisely because of the history of Russia as it relates to people who are struggling for freedom.
And the Palestinian question as well.
Palestinian question.
Nelson Mandela was very clear that as he was fighting for the rights of South Africans, he is on record as saying, even when we win this struggle, we will not have completed our mission until the Palestinians are free.
Yes.
So, in fact, a lot of people don't know, the first head of state that Madiba went to see when he was released from Robben Island was Fidel Castro.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks don't know that history, but in fact, Mandela said, and I'll paraphrase, "Your enemy is not my enemy, and I am not going to allow you to select who my friends and who my enemies are."
Sure. That's the thing. 60 years ago, African people in this country initiated the Freedom Summit in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And we dealt with the Freedom Summit in 1964. It was revolving around just democratic rights for Black people being murdered, especially in Mississippi, which was the headquarters of much of the terror, being murdered, African people being denied access to the ballot, just as what's happening with us, as quiet as it's kept them. I fought for the Civil Rights Bill. I fought for the Voting Rights Act, and now I'm being charged because of participating independently in the electoral process. But 60 years ago, Freedom Summer, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was the key force in creating the Freedom Summer, and people came from all around the country into Mississippi. And a lot of white people came. And this was something that SNCC did deliberately, in part because they knew that if white people came, the ruling class media that was no longer paying attention to the civil rights movement, just as they don't in this movement, if white people came, then the media would come with them because some were children of media owners and big shot white people. And also the white people who came would face some of the same threats that Africans were facing in Mississippi. And as you know, on the first day of Freedom Summer, 1964, in Mississippi, 3 people died, 2 of whom were white, Schwerner and
Goodman and Cheney.
Right. And then and that brought a lot of attention to it. But off of that movement in 1964, that pushed the Civil Rights Act. That pushed them to have to, in 1965, pass the voting rights legislation. But 1965 is also the year that killed Malcolm X. And so that even though now you can vote, that they're doing things to eliminate what you would vote for. They killed Malcolm X. 1968, they killed Martin Luther King. 1969, the war against the Black Panther Party was clear to everybody around the whole world, that you had the head of the FBI declaring that the Black Panther Party represented the greatest threat to the internal security of this country. They arrested 21 members of the Black Panther Party on a conspiracy charge in New York, on more than 100 charges, including threats to blow up the flowers in the botanical garden, that thing that lasted for 2 years, and they beat every one of the charges. And they were ridiculous charges in the first place, but you had this period. So what we've done is we are now engaged in the Freedom Summer Project, Freedom Summer in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right across the bridge from Tampa, Florida, where the court that we will be going to is located. And we're inviting everybody. We've already begun. We're going door to door, talking to people, educating the people in the community about this case and about other things that's happening in the world. We are having forums and discussions. People are doing street corner stuff with banners, etc. We're calling people to come into St. Petersburg, Florida now. And then, of course, on August 31st, we have a massive mobilization that's going to be happening where people, again, will be coming from. I mean, we've got commitments for participation from Cornel West, from Jill Stein, from Charles Barron, from just a host of other people. Everybody's going to be in St. Petersburg, Florida for Freedom Summer. And the Freedom Summer is going to have similar consequences from this that the Freedom Summer of 1964 had, that gave rise to the Civil Rights Bill, that gave rise to the Voting Rights Act, that gave rise to the Black Power movement in 1966. All of these things came out of that, and we are rebuilding a whole movement. But with this attack on us, we are reestablishing the legitimacy of the entire struggle against colonialism and against imperialism.
We're talking about the First Amendment. We're talking about the right of freedom of speech. And there's a whole campaign, as you've mentioned Zuckerberg a couple of times, and there's a whole campaign against social media access and freedom of speech on social media. The United States government is using Zuckerberg. Yes. They're using some of the others to help to assist them in deplatforming people. And what this really comes down to is the power of the narrative. Whose story is going to be told?
That's it.
And by whom?
That's it.
So it's not so much that what you are advocating is seditious. No, the problem the government has is the narrative you're telling, the facts that you are providing, is counter to that narrative, and then that threatens the empire.
Yes, that is the truth. And I'm reminded of this movie. I forgot the name of it, where you had these two characters. Tom Cruise, I think, played some kind of lawyer, and Jack Nicholson.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want the truth. I want the truth. Say you can't handle the truth.
truth.
That's essentially the case with the United States.
Now, let me quickly jump in, and because there's a reason that your narrative about Ukraine and my narrative about Ukraine and Russia's narrative about Ukraine are basically the same.
Yeah.
Because we're telling the truth.
The truth.
And all you have to do is Google what we say about it. Google the Maidan coup. Google the now I'm drawing a blank on the agreement that they reached. The Minsk Accords.
Yes.
Google the Minsk Accords. Google the Maidan coup. Go back and look at when Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin in Geneva, Switzerland, and Putin told Biden, I'm giving you my security demands in writing, and I expect your response in writing. And Joe Biden ignored him.
Yes.
You can Google Secretary of State Baker meeting with Gorbachev and promising Gorbachev, NATO will not, if you agree to the reunification of East and West Germany, I guarantee you NATO will not move any further eastward towards Russia. Towards the Soviet Union.
Yes.
You can, that's all fact.
Yes. But fact, you can't handle fact. You see, because what they've done, first of all, just think about who controls the narrative. I've seen like Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
She's just thrown this thing out about their slogan is, we won't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's our slogan. Not one step backwards. Not one. That's
no retreat. No retreat. Not one step back.
Not one step backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is Zuckerberg won't let anybody hear what I got to say. I go on Facebook or on social media, and there are fewer people who see me than there are members of one of our local organizations. They won't let that happen. But so Kamala takes this because it resonates. Because it speaks to the reality of Black people who say, we won't go back. We're not going backwards. We're not going to let you push us back in the back of the bus. We're not going to do any buck dancing and shuffling and this kind of stuff. Not one step backwards, right? That's our position. And so now Kamala, because it resonates with Black people, Zuckerberg won't let the people hear that from us. Mm-hmm. So Kamala comes forward. We won't go back. This is a part of the process that they're trying to solve a particular problem of the Democratic Party, to re-energize it among African people, many of whom are even going to the Republican Party, and Trump and others was just discussing and not going to vote at all. So that's the controlling of the narrative. How that narrative gets out, that's a critical question, and that's the question of free speech as well. And that's why it's so important, again, that we're having this discussion now.
In fact, there's another slogan that if folks knew the true origins of it, it would have an impact on the narrative, and that is from the river to the sea. That is now being described, or it is being used as this racist trope by Palestinians who are using it to say they want to cleanse historic Palestine of Jews. No, actually, folks, and look it up because it's fact, that was the Zionist slogan.
It was.
Back in the 30s.
It was. They wanted all. That's what they were saying. They wanted all.
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea.
And what they don't tell you about the slogan now is what do the Palestinians say? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Yeah.
That they're talking about democracy.
Yes.
They're talking about one person, one vote.
Yes.
They're not talking about genocide and removing people from their homes, killing their olive trees, and
they're saying let people come back home. They're saying let the people come back home, because the truth of the matter is the way they've distorted this whole history is that in Palestine, there were Jews, there were Muslims, there were Christians, all living together in Palestine. And now you have this situation where these settlers brought in by the imperialist powers, and you can go back to Balfour Declaration in 1917, I think it was. You can go back to the agreement that was made
Sykes-Picot agreement.
Yeah, that created the borders that now are Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon. White people did that. And for their own benefit, et cetera. And then they act like they're surprised because there's chaos happening in those circumstances. So they've distorted this history. And it's all right for them to put lyrics in a song called From Sea to Shining Sea, which was a declaration that all of this land of the indigenous people, they wanted all of it. It's not like they brought a million people here when they came. There's just a handful, but they set out to take every square inch from sea to shining sea. And we say from sea to shining sea, the indigenous people will be free. And from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. So, but history is something else. You can't make it go away just because you don't like it.
As much as they're trying. And they're doing it. And I have to go back to this whole idea, because one of the things that I have found in reading history is that the United States, when the United States finds itself in conflict, that's when the government becomes very sensitive about what's being said and who's saying it and when it's being said. So you can go back to World War I, and you touched on this. You can go back to World War I, and that's when we first started seeing anti-sedition laws.
Yes.
When the United States was involved in World War I and was very fearful about losing the war, then the United States was very concerned about people speaking out against what the government considered to be their interests. And then after that, after those forces were vanquished and the dust started to settle, well, then things started to relax and folks started saying more. And then we had the same problem in World War II. And then after the threats were vanquished, then you could just about say anything. So with the attacks on you, with the attacks on Scott Ritter, with the attacks on others, is that a signal to you that the United States is scared?
It is a signal that the rulers of this country experience a very fragile situation. It is not like they control the world the way they used to. It is not like they can tell people to shut up and people will do what they say. They couldn't get even stooges in Africa to come out and support their position on Ukraine. They can't get people who they considered backwaters and back in their backyard, who they've characterized as banana republics in the past, to just do what it is that they want them to do. They can't control Nicaragua, and they've tried. They can't control Venezuela, and they're trying even up to this point. Right. They can't control the Palestinian people who are resisting. And so it's a very fragile situation because it's a situation that rests upon a colonial mode of production where the entire process of human beings engaged in production in the world today is on a parasitic foundation of colonialism. And so it's a very tenuous situation for them. And I'm reminded of this statement by George Orwell in the book 1984. Yeah, when he says, who controls the past controls the future. And who controls the present controls the past. And this is where they found themselves in a really shaky foundation of controlling the past.
That's why they go after Scott Ritter, because he has the historic documents.
Yes. And that's why they're attacking us.
Right.
They want history to start in 2014 when they say that somehow I became a stooge of Russia. That's where they want history to start. They don't want history to start with a murder of Black people that would have incentivized us to take the kind of political stance that we take. They want to say the history of our party over the last 50 or more years, and our position consistent around genocide, around reparations, around, and actually I developed excuse me, a pamphlet, Tactics and Strategy, that included looking for allies around the world and the struggle against colonialism, but that they don't want to talk about. So from their perspective, they're trying to control the past. In that courtroom, they want to control the past. They've even moved that they want to deny us the right to use the First Amendment as a defense. Do you hear what I just said?
Say it again.
Yeah, they want to deny us the right to use the First Amendment as a defense in court.
And that centers around, and I haven't studied that point.
Yeah.
But I believe it's because they know on that point they lose. So what they're saying is it's not a matter of you don't have the right to say what you said. It's that we don't like what you're saying.
But that's the real deal. But the way they clothe that, the way they try to hide their hand, and I think it's so shallow, so weak, is they say,
well, hell, if I figured it out, it ain't that deep.
Oh, that's funny. What they're saying is that we're not attacking them because they said something. We're attacking them because they said it because the Russians told them to say it. Mm-hmm. So they try to liquidate the free speech question by turning speech into an act. You see? So
as a foreign agent.
Yes. And it's ridiculous.
And I want to be sure I don't forget this point. To your point about erasing history, another example of that is Hamas's attack on October 7th. The 99% of the narrative is this conflict started on October 7th. Ignoring the Nakba in 1947. That has absolutely nothing to do with this. And the over 50 years of genocide, oppression, and war crimes. Oh, no, forget that. That had nothing to do with October 7th. That's another example of what you said.
It's an example. And the fact is, one thing we know is that there are people who don't know me, don't know the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, and they hear us say something, and then they hear the United States government say something. And so, sometimes they might have some struggles in trying to understand who might be telling the truth. And the fact is that the oppressed must have truth, because we cannot win freedom without truth. The oppressor cannot have truth because they can't have slavery where truth is involved. And so this is the thing that, you start off knowing, that those people who oppress, and there's no way you can deny the historical oppression of African people unless you control the courtrooms like they do now. Mm-hmm. You have the guns that can wake people up at 5 o'clock in the morning with flashbang grenades and things like that. The fact is that there are certain things that cannot be controlled, cannot be denied in terms of the history of oppression of African people in this country. And what they would do, of course, is they would use examples like Obama and Kamala Harris, because they want to contain the struggle around racism. And you say, well, racism doesn't exist anymore, not as bad because we elected a black president, or we are getting ready to select another Negro president, Negro Indian president. But it's not about race as such. Except to the extent that race represents and identifies a colonial population. The fact is we suffer from colonialism. So you can have black people who represent the colonial empire, just like you've had that African people, Mobutu, and all over Africa, and other puppets like that, and most of Africa today.
William Ruto in Kenya, being bought off to help the United States reinvade Haiti.
That's right. And so, that's what they've been able to do. And that's why the colonial question, understanding colonialism is so important, and not colonialism just as a policy, but as a mode of production that came into existence with the first time in human history where there was a single world economy. And that world economy was something that was initiated by Portugal's attack on Africa in something like 1415. And then started the dispersal of African people and others who in what is now Europe jumped in and participated in this process. That's where you got the so-called America from. That's where you got Brazil. That's where you got all of these territories throughout the so-called South America as a consequence of that initial attack and the world economy that was knit together for the first time in history. That is not just a policy of a particular government, as it may have been when Portugal started, as it may have been when some other country started, but now it's a world. It's the basis of the whole world economy. It is a colonial mode of production, and to the extent that we understand this and really get a hold of that, we don't have to have somebody, Russians or somebody, tell us what to do. We know that when colonialism tries to exert itself, or when people are fighting against colonialism, it's part of a common struggle. And so I had never met a Nicaraguan in my life when the Nicaraguan revolutions heated up. And we organized in San Francisco, Tampa, Bay Area, we organized the first mass meeting, solidarity with Nicaraguan people, because we understood that was our struggle too. And we built the whole movement in support of Nicaragua, because it is one mode of production. Colonialism is the thing that knits this whole process together, where you have colonizers and colonized. And the vast majority of the people in the world experience the negatives of colonialism through this colonial mode of production. It's only a handful of people, and that's something that's not widely understood either. Only a minority of the population benefits from this economic system that they've created on the backs of African and colonized people around the world.
And as you talk about Nicaragua, about 3 weeks ago, Chiquita Brands was found guilty in a Florida court of funding death squads in Colombia.
Yeah.
And they were held to have, now they have to pay millions and millions and millions of dollars to the survivors. I just use that as another example of the colonialism that you're talking about. And that whole story right there could take us into another hour about immigration. And because the question that's not being asked in this political context about border protection and immigration, they keep talking about, what are we going to do with all of these people that are at our border, but they don't ask, why are the people coming in the first place?
Yeah.
And so that because we could talk about Haiti. Why are there Haitians at the border at Texas and in Mexico, California, because the United States is decimating the Haitian economy? Why are these people coming from Guatemala, Honduras, all over Central and South America? Because the United States has decimated their economies, and the people have no other choice.
That's true. And I think, even a related truth is the fact that when people talk about immigrants, sometimes they like to call America just a nation of immigrants.
The melting pot.
They call it the nation of immigrants. And we say, first of all, America is not a nation. It's a prison of nations. And that Black people are not immigrants. We are captives. That's how we came here, as captives. Now, we are the only people, other than the indigenous people, who did not come here looking for a better way of life, but lost a better way of life as a consequence of having been brought here. When you look at all the places where Europeans have gone to, running from poverty, running from disease, running from despotism, from monarchy and a feudal system, they came here. They came to the Americas. They came all these other places. They occupied New Zealand, Australia, and things like that. So when you look at immigrants, and when they say that America's a nation of immigrants, what they're talking about is them. They are the ones who are immigrants. And why the hell did they come? They were running from terror. And this is the origin of the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights, because they faced tyranny and the divine right of kings. They had no rights. So they came here to this land, and then they initiated laws and things like that to protect them from tyranny. but they won the freedom to oppress, because when they were doing this, African people were enslaved. The Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, was ratified by the United States Congress in 1791. 1791, African people were under the whip, under being enslaved, beaten and raped and stuff legally. So it wasn't for us. And this is something I'm trying to help white people understand, that what they do is they will pick someone that they have made extremely unpopular. When they want to attack a basic and fundamental right, they would pick someone they think they've made extremely unpopular, and they will use them as the means to attack that right. They can't attack my right to free speech in many ways because I never had it. Look at people like Emmett Till, who they butchered because they said that he whistled at a white woman. And the fact is that black people learn how to shuffle and hold their heads down and not look up and not say anything that white people would find offensive. And this has been the history. So when they come at the Bill of Rights, when they come at the First Amendment, as quiet as it's kept, they're simply using us as the means by which they can attack the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the constitutional and democratic rights of everybody in this country, including white people. And we see evidence of that. You talk about Scott Ritter, you talk about all these other people who they are attacking now, in total disregard of what the Constitution is supposed to be about.
HandsoffUhuru.org, handsoffUhuru.org. What do you want folks to, and before I ask that question, let me say this. To those of you who are watching this that are just saying, oh, these guys are tripping, these guys are drunk. Look, folks, just research what we're talking about. That's all you got to do. You can either summarily dismiss us, or again, look up the Maidan coup. Look up the Minsk Accords. Look up Chiquita Brands being found guilty in a Florida court for sponsoring death squads in Colombia. Look it up. And what you'll find is we're confusing you with the facts.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. So Chairman Yeshitela, what do you want my audience to do as it relates to the Uhuru Three?
Well, one thing I want the audience to do is to understand that we are not guilty of anything they've charged us of. They've used the facts, as I mentioned earlier, that I went to Moscow, that we ran people for office, etc., and they've used these facts to obscure the truth. And the truth that we didn't do what they said they do. Our lawyers, though, for the sake of court argument, says that even if we did it, it's protected by the Constitution. So that's one thing I think is really important. And the other thing is that we are transparent. You don't engage in some kind of conspiracy to overthrow, disabuse the government in public. Everything that we talk about is in our newspaper. They don't have to use flashbang grenades, bust down doors and stuff like that. Get a copy of the newspaper. It only costs $1. Go to our websites. Everything is spelled out. The books that we printed, all of it's in the books that we've written. So people should go to Hands Off Uhuru. That's handsoffUhuru.org. Hands Off Uhuru. We want you to read the indictment. We want you to see it. We want you to see our response to that indictment. We want you to see their response to our response. Read it. And and because we believe that if people know the truth and the court is aware that people are aware of the truth, etc., it makes it enhances the ability of the court to go by the law, which is what we want them to do, because they are using the law to pursue a political objective of destroying our movement, destroying the struggle of African people to win freedom and to take away basic rights from other people. So we want you to read the indictments and the court documents that's associated with that. We want you to come to St. Petersburg, Florida. Come now. Come anytime and stay as long as you can, because we're going to be doing this work, moving toward a massive event on August 31st. And then from August 31st, which is the weekend before the trial in Tampa, right across the bridge, on the September 3rd, there's a trial. And we want you to be at that trial. So come and organize on the ground. Come to the summer project that that we've initiated here, the Freedom Summer in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we'll be educating people, organizing, doing forums, doing door-to-door work, doing political education, the whole bit. And that's what we're looking for. And we say hands off Uhuru, uhuru.org. And we really appreciate all the support that the people have given. And you, Carmen Wilman, thank you so very much as well.
It is
and
my
Melody.
Melody Graves, as always. Without her, you and I would just be sitting here talking to ourselves.
I got it.
Chairman, Brother Omali Yeshitela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. And I want to thank your audience. It's just splendid to be here with you. Thank you so much.
And folks, as Chairman Yeshitela just said, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. There are new episodes every week. Also, please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, and follow us on social media. You can find all the links below in the show description. That Patreon page is very, very important because your contributions help and enable us to do the work that we do here. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you all again next time. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Uhuru. Have a good one. Peace. We're out.
Uhuru.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.